Because sound travels at a fairly constant speed, the lower the frequency, the longer the waveform is. If you divide out the speed of sound, which is about 1100 feet per second, then a tone of the 1100 hertz will have a wavelength of about 1 foot. Now, if you do the math, then a 100 hertz tone will be about 11 feet long, and really high frequencies can only just be inches long. Now, why am I telling you this? Why am I going into wavelengths and all that stuff? Because you're a geek, right? No offense, I'm a geek too. No, actually, there's probably no reason to really think about this stuff unless you're designing rooms that have standing waves or positioning multiple mics on a sound source. Actually, just a quick factoid to kind of keep you on your toes right here. By the way, here's one for extra credit. What's the exact speed of sound? Now, that's actually a trick question because there is none for all situations. The exact speed is 1126 feet per second with dry air at sea level at 20 degrees Celsius or about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Anyway, all this knowledge is kind of fun the next time that you have a thunderstorm and you count the seconds between the lightning and the thunder. But for our EQ course, let's just zero in on just the frequency spectrum and have a really close look at the fundamental frequency chart. So here's a frequency spectrum chart that shows all the fundamental frequencies of various instruments. But rather than going through all this right now, let's start off with something that we're all very familiar with, and that is a piano. And the very lowest A on a piano, A1, vibrates at 27.5. Next octave up is 55 hertz, followed by 110 hertz. A4 is 220. A5 is 440. Now you might have noticed those various tuning forks. We're using them less and less now that we can bring up a tuning fork on our phones and things like that. But certainly when I was growing up, when you were tuning things, a tuning fork would be the way that you would tune up to something. And quite often you'd see the initials A440 on those tuning forks. That's because if you struck that tuning fork, the I think they're called tines, the two kind of tongues of that tuning fork would vibrate at exactly 440, which is A5. Let's go up to the next octave. 880, 1760, and 3520. Now, can I direct your attention to the numbers at each successive A every time you go up an octave? Do you notice anything about those numbers? Do you see what happens every time that you go up an octave? So for example, check out what happens on a guitar. I'll play an open A, which is the second fattest string on a guitar. Now, when I press down on the 12th fret here, what I'm actually doing is halving the length of the string. The 12th fret has that little double dot that you might see on here. It's exactly the halfway point between the nut here and the bridge right here. It's the halfway point. So if we press down here, an interesting thing happens. The string vibrates twice as fast. This is 110 hertz, 110 times a second, and up an octave is 220 hertz, or twice as fast. That's the relationship between octaves and hertz. Let's look at this again. Look at all those numbers. They all double every octave. Now, if you weren't sleeping through math class back in high school, you could say the octave relationship, that is A1, A2, A3, A4, up to A8, that is a linear relationship. Octave 1, octave 2, octave 3, and so on. But the hertz relationship is exponential. It doubles every octave. So here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine that I can hear basically from 0 kilohertz. I mean, I know I start from 20, but let's, for argument's sake, it's 0 to 20K. 0 to 20. Where would the mid-range be? Smack dab in between 0 and 20. You would think it would be 10K, right? Split any measurement between 0 and 20 down the middle, and it's going to be around 10. But if we thought that, we'd be dead wrong. Let's look at our